What's up everybody, KleverKrok back for another draft analysis video. The first of Gen 7 and the first in 2017. Welcome back guys. I hope you all have had a good holiday break, and for those who are going back to school, I'm so sorry. But today I thought we'd start with one of my favorite new Pokemon, an absolute OU meta threat. This thing, some people say it should be in Ubers. I don't know about that, but it definitely is a monster. There's not a bunch of ways to run it, but it does have some variability. And as far as the draft goes, and drafting it for your league or for the GTA, it's hard because, you know, I haven't personally drafted it, but I can see the potential that it has, not only through the regular metagame, but through just the ways that, like, through the moves and the abilities that it has and how that's performed on other Pokemon in the past, if that makes sense. So the first set that I would like to look at is the Merciless sets. The first one is basically just full offensive or bulky offensive. I mean, obviously you're not going to run like a sweeper set on this, but you can run a bulky physical sweeper on this with the Merciless if you set up the Baneful Bunker to get a poison on something, or you get Toxic Spikes up. This honestly has good synergy with Salazzle, the only problem mainly being the Earthquake weakness. But, I mean, getting those spikes up and poisoning at everything, and then having not the best attack stat, but then getting like the Merciless trigger every turn, and then having Poison Jab and Liquidation for really good stab. Liquidation obviously having that chance to lower defense as well, making it a pretty scary threat. I personally haven't used this very much, but I've seen it used, and it can be pretty scary if you can get those spikes up early. So that's a pretty cool set, I would say. The other Merciless set would be something that I kind of just threw together that I thought would be really neat, and I've messed around with it a little bit. It's pretty fun when it works. It's obviously maybe not as consistent as the other one, but obviously you're still banking on the poisons, so you set up spikes early, whether it be with the Toxapex or something else, and it's defensive this time because you're really not going just for damage. It's more of like a disruptor set because you have the Venoshock, which, you know, the power doubles when it's poisoned, so that helps. You have recover for sustain. And then the Venom Drench is cool because you usually can't like use this competitively, but with Toxic Spikes and maybe even using Baneful Bunker instead of Recover since you have the Black Sludge. And you know, like on top of that, Merciless also increasing the damage with Venoshock. You could also honestly run Regenerator on this and still get the use out of it that you need to. But Venom Drench is a really cool move, you know, essentially lowering, its attack, special attack, and speed all, you know, by one if the foe is poisoned, otherwise it doesn't do anything. But it's some really, really cool stuff that you can do with that. So I could see that being something especially useful in the draft format where you can plan accordingly, knowing, okay, well they have all these steel types and or poison types I can't really set up with Toxic Spikes, or they have a lot of flyers or something. I won't be able to do that. Or, you know, you go to, you know, a match where you have a lot of Pokemon that are susceptible to that, and then you can take great advantage of that. And this thing is just unkillable in general, especially as a physical wall. If you run it like this, you not only get to take advantage of, you know, wearing things down with just so much poison, but you're really hard to kill even on the physical side from like Earthquake and Psyshock and stuff. It's ridiculous. So those are two sets that you can use as Merciless. Like I said, the second set you can also use as Regenerator. The third set is the one that I tend to use most often, which is the standard physical wall set with Scald, Haze, Toxic Spikes, and Recover. And some of you guys might be wondering, you know, hey, you know, why aren't you running Baneful Bunker? And, you know, honestly, I use that move all the time early on, and then I realized it's just so bulky with Regenerator and Recover. You don't really need it. You're like, yeah, the poison is kind of a nice tech to be able to protect yourself and potentially poison a foe, but they have to make contact, and so it's nice and it's good situationally, but I found that in general this thing is a lot scarier because Haze is so important in this new meta, and it probably in the old meta too, but haze stopping things like Porygon Z with the Z conversion, any Dragon Dance sweepers, the Beast Boost triggers from all of the Ultra Beasts, all of those things being big threats that you really can't just stop. And this thing can usually eat a hit at the very least before it goes down, and even if you have to sacrifice it to get rid of the the sweeping potential of the Pokemon that's being used, at least you can stop it. Haze on such a bulky Pokemon is really great. Obviously Toxic Spikes is really good. I've found that I really love Spikes and Toxic Spikes put together in this generation, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Now the next one is also very, very similar. I think it's actually the same. The only thing that's different is that obviously you're specially defensive as opposed to physically defensive. But as you can tell, even with the low HP stat, it's still so bulky on both sides, even if you're specially defensive or physically defensive. Either way, as you can tell, you just have really good stats in your defenses regardless. So it really, and with Regenerator, you could come in still on some physical hits and take it and just switch out, which is awesome. And so the third set's kind of a mixed wall, which I've been using lately, that I've had some pretty good success with, where you give most of the investment into, that's weird, HP obviously, most in the Spadef, and then have an Ambition Nature, and it makes it kind of more well-rounded, but obviously it doesn't have the ability to eat as many intense hits on the physical or the special side, but what you get in return is that you can take more on both sides, if that makes sense. Just not as much damage on one particular end. So it's good to have it if you're going to run a bulky, slow team. It might be good to have it with something else that can be mixed, or maybe it's a third tank that you have, and it also is your setup. Now, in this particular case, it's a mixed wall, and I give it Liquidation just for that damage. Toxic, Stockpile, and Recover are nice because, Stockpile and Recover is ridiculous to have together with as bulky as it already is. So being able to set that up and install with Toxic or Toxic Spikes or Haze or whatever. Well, Haze would actually work against you with Stockpile, but regardless, it's still, Stockpile is pretty scary. Imagine having to deal with that in the draft format especially. No thank you. No thank you. So lastly, before we look at some Pokemon that I think synergize well with Toxapex, we're going to look at a couple other moves that you might want to consider, whether you're playing doubles, singles, in draft, or on Smogon or VGC. Obviously, most of my experience has been on Smogon and in Pokemon Showdown, so when I'd say doubles, I know that there are good moves in doubles, but beyond that, I haven't got a lot of experience in that regard. But Infestation is nice if you're going to run that Toxic Infestation. Maybe you do Toxic, Infestation, Stockpile, Recover instead of Liquidation, so you can trap things and then you just don't die because you're so bulky. It's like, that would be really good. Light Screen's also a good option both for singles and doubles. It's good to be able to set up screens, especially if you're physically defensive with your Toxapex, or if you have a consistency problem with that. Wide Guard is obviously good for doubles, and being able to have that on a really bulky Pokemon is really helpful. And the Safeguard is just another option that you can have, which really doesn't do much for Toxapex, considering it can't be poisoned. Paralysis doesn't do anything to it, and it almost like doesn't care if it gets burned pretty much at all, especially with that Regenerator ability. I don't really see a point for using Limber when Merciless and Regenerator are still the options, and I think, again, Regenerator is probably its best ability, but you could find use for Merciless as well, definitely. So, the next thing I want to move on to, actually, would be the Pokemon that synergize well with Toxapex. And these aren't the only ones, these are the ones that I've experienced that I feel like are really fun to use together. Now the first one, you're probably going to be like, well, they have a major common weakness in Electric, Skarmory and Toxapex. Well, what I would say is, even though that's the case, you can cover that with something like a Alolan Marowak, any ground type, or Jolteon, or any other electric type that has that electric, an electric immunity ability. So, there's that, and I think that's really helpful. So being able to set up spikes with your other wall and toxic spikes with Toxapex, and then having Whirlwind to phase things out and just completely wear down the opponent's team, that's worked really well for me in a lot of matches so far on the ladder. So Skarmory is a really good option. You can usually cover their weakness pretty well. You know, you can have dragon types, you can have, again, Alolan Marowak's especially a good one because it has that immunity, and a lot of electric types right now are being run as choiced and not Life Orb. And so with that, you know, you get to switch in on it with a Lightning Rod Alolan Marowak, for example, and then you get to Flame Charge Croc, and we'll cover Alolan Marowak in the future. But you know, just to say, that's another really good option. It also is immune to fighting type moves and rapid spin, you know, and so that's really good. And having again Skarmory who's immune to ground type moves, and then resistant to psychic moves, which honestly, you know, if you want, you could even run it like specially defensive, and it can still take hits on both sides. And you know, as you may have seen in the season 4 of the GTA, I actually ran Skarmory especially defensive a few times in the tournament, and it worked out really well for me. So that's an option. Another Pokemon that I've had good success with, combining, using together, being Hydreigon and Toxapex. Hydreigon's good because it's got that immunity to ground, it's got that immunity to psychic, and it's got a resistance to electric. And when you switch in, yeah, you don't necessarily want to just switch in Hydreigon on every attack, but it's nice because Hydreigon's main weaknesses are also covered by Toxapex in Fairy, which is a really big one. Ice. Dragon it doesn't, but I mean Toxapex is bulky enough to take most dragon hits. And then Fighting, Toxapex resists, and Bug, Toxapex resists. So really good synergy there, I would say. And then this is just the set that I've been running it on, is a modest Choice Scarf set. You know, being able to switch in Hydreigon, force the switch out, and go for U-turn, or just straight damage if you feel like you can knock out whatever comes in. Excuse me. And so another really good option in my opinion. Going off of the same kind of train of thought as before, Crocodile is actually a really good option too, which I'm really excited because I've used them a couple times. I need to find a better team comp to use both Toxapex and Crocodile in, because even though I like the idea of being immune to electric and psychic, which covers 2 of its weaknesses, and the only problem being ground, that's really nice for Toxapex to not have to worry about, you know, to have 2 immunities in one Pokemon that it can be paired with. And then, you know, especially with psychic types, like fast psychic types, whether they're choiced or Life Orb or whatever, you can run Choice Scarf or Choice Band. I know that's what I have on the screen, but you could definitely run Choice Scarf as well. And Pursuit Trap, a lot of Pokemon. Earthquake and Knockoff can also do a lot. And then you get that Moxie boost, so you can get a lot of sweeping potential by having that option as well. You know, Water Poison, just in general, is a really good typing, and Toxapex really appreciates the stat distribution that he got, except for maybe the HP. But if he had any more HP, I think he would be pretty broken. So, Crocodile, another good option to pair with him. Just keep in mind that Toxapex doesn't eat... Yeah, it's a neutral hit from grass-type moves, but it doesn't eat it the best depending on where it gets hit, whether it be the physical or the special side, and what build you're using on your Toxapex. And Crocodile, you know, if you switch out, it's gonna not necessarily take ground moves the best either. So you'll have to keep that stuff in mind. But I still think as far as an offensive synergizing thing, kind of like Hydreigon, it's a good answer in my opinion. So the final one is the one that I like to pair with Toxapex the most out of these guys, and that's Ferrothorn. And you guys probably hate me for saying that because Ferrothorn is really annoying to deal with, and Toxapex is seeming to be very similar in that regard. So I think that it's fun, and this is just my personal opinion, but I think it's fun to run a mixed wall set on both Ferrothorn and Toxapex because they cover each other almost perfectly. I mean, you've got the electric resistance in Ferrothorn, you've got the psychic resistance in Ferrothorn, and you've got the like a neutral ground hit on Ferrothorn, which isn't the best, but it's again, really bulky, and if you run it physically defensive, even more so. And it could definitely take 2 earthquakes from most things. So, you know, obviously running things like Gyro Ball, Leech Seed, Spikes, Thunder Wave, maybe even Stealth Rocks as one of those, or Power Whip, depending on what you really need. Running Leftovers is probably a good option on it because it doesn't have much sustain otherwise. However, so now you think about, okay, well, Toxapex, its weaknesses are essentially covered really well in one of the other really bulky Pokemon in OU. But Ferrothorn's weaknesses in fighting and fire are perfectly taken care of in Toxapex. And so I think they work really well together. You obviously still get to set up plenty of hazards, wear down opponents, obviously with Leech Seed especially, and Thunder Wave, and then Poisoning, and you know, it's actually really annoying. I would not want to play against myself with the team that I use those 2 on. But they're both really good. Obviously, you know, ground is still somewhat of a problem, so you definitely want to have a Levitate Pokemon or a Pokemon with Flying type to cover that for Toxapex. That also isn't necessarily weak to Ice, because Mamoswine is running rampant right now, and he really appreciates that dual typing, especially with Toxapex being one of the premier walls right now. So Skarmory is actually really good for that, because even though he has a neutral, he takes Ice type moves neutrally. I believe Life Orb Mamoswine does like 40, like just under 50% to a fully physically defensive Skarmory, which is really nice. So, you know, with that you can switch it in, roost until it switches out, or set up spikes, or just let it go down, but you have a way of being able to switch back and forth. And that's why I like Skarmory too, is because it has that ground immunity that it can cover for in Toxapex, whereas Ferrothorn cannot. So it's really up to you what you want. Other than that, I think this is just an amazing Pokemon. Toxapex really just puts in the work, and again, you know, you've got your Merciless set, which I think is probably more beneficial in the draft format, where you can decide, you know, hey, I have these toxic, you know, the ability to not only just use Toxic, but I also have Baneful Bunker and Toxic Spikes that I can play around with to, you know, poison all of my opponent's Pokemon, and then I can take advantage of that with Venoshock, Venom Drench, Merciless triggers to, you know, because Merciless, what it does, if you didn't know, and I've just been saying it this whole time, Merciless, what it does is it makes all moves that hit the opponent do critical hit damage if the opponent is poisoned, which is really crazy. So, but other than that, I mean, yeah, it's just a really good Pokemon. It's just ridiculous that you can run it physically or specially defensive, and it be almost identical in its bulk on either side, and you can run it mixed as well and still have fun. It's got an okay move pool. It's really not the best, but it has what it needs. I think that's the important part. And so, without like knowing how it will perform per se in the draft format, I think given its stat distribution and the moves that it has access to, I'm gonna give this thing an A-, because, you know, I would probably otherwise just give it an A or A+, honestly, because it's just that good. But I don't know if its predictability and like what you're gonna expect it to do will be enough to kind of deal with it more easily than you would in just OU. So, you know, yeah, I'd say A- is pretty fair. Again, it's really good. You've got plenty of stuff that you can pair it up with, and these are just some examples. But this Pokemon's going to be really crazy in the draft format. I'm excited to hopefully use it at some point to see how it performs in other leagues and stuff like that. So if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all next time.